Hello and welcome to Weekly MTG. I'm your host, Blake Rasmussen, and we have a huge show for you today, especially if you love playing Magic, which why else would you be here? We've got announcements for the future of next year's Premier Play. That's right, the MagicCon schedule. We've got that. We've got RCQ information. And we have two very special guests. We're going to spend this whole show talking about the upcoming World Championship happening at MagicCon Las Vegas, the 24th through the 26th. Let's kick things off, though, with a highly anticipated announcement of the schedule for MagicCons in 2025. Take it away, Fibble. That is a big part of our schedule of Premier Play in 2025. MagicCons in Chicago, Las Vegas, and Atlanta. We will be returning to Europe soon. Stay tuned to MTG Festivals for more on that. But also keep in mind that this is part of a larger constellation. 2025 is going to be a huge year for Magic Play. We've got the Spotlight Series kicking off with 5 events in the United States, 2 events in Europe, and 1 in Japan. Some of the information for those is already out. Some of those are still coming, but 2025 is going to be a huge year for high-level Magic Play. And who better to talk about high-level Magic Play than our next guest? Before I do that, I almost forgot. Also head to magic.gg. There is information on the Regional Championship qualifier seasons coming up, as well as the extension of the New Perspectives Grant, which, if you know what that is, fantastic opportunity for people to win and earn trips to MagicCon. So more on that at magic.gg. But let's talk about the World Championship coming up at MagicCon Las Vegas, and 2 people who are going to have huge impacts on that weekend in little slightly different ways. Joining us on the show today, we have Maria Bartholdi and Simon Nielsen. Welcome, you two. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Blake. Happy to be here.
Yeah, super happy to have you.
Thank you for having me as a guest.
Yeah. Super excited to have you both. So, for those who don't know, why don't you each share what you're going to be doing over the World Championship weekend? Maria.
Thanks, Blake. Yes, I'll be hosting the World Championship. It's my favorite show of the year. It's the biggest show of the year, and it's World Championship 30, so it's a big deal. And I'm so very, very, very excited to be hosting it coming up next weekend. I can hardly believe I'm saying that, next weekend, and excited to meet everybody at the con too.
Yeah, Simon, what are you doing that weekend?
I'll just be hanging out. I mean, I'll be doing like my favorite thing, which is to play Magic the Gathering at a high level. So that'll be really cool. And yeah, I'm just gonna trying to play another big tournament here.
Yeah, try to win a few games, see what happens. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. Simon's got a big weekend. He's underplaying it a little bit. But first, let's talk about what the weekend looks like as a whole. And let's put up some pictures of some familiar faces. And Maria, why don't you tell me about this crew?
Oh man, we have a great crew at World Championship 30 coming up. I'm so very, very excited to be back at the news desk with my bestie, Monty Davuti will be at the news desk with me this weekend. Cedric Phillips is going to be there as well. It's not a show without Ceddy P. Marshall Sutcliffe and Paul Cheon, everybody. Start the hype train back in the booth together again. It's been a long time since we've been able to cast with Paul, and I am so excited to see him this weekend. He, of course, is one of the best, and I'm sure he's going to take us out out for some great meals as well. And we've got Ailey Loney and Corey Baumeister. They have so much fun together in the booth, and they're just a joy to listen to each and every single time. So this is really the best of the best, and I'm so excited to cast with them this coming weekend.
And let's take a look at the summary of the event. Okay, note on this. We were doing this math before the show, and it broke our brains a little bit. So you'll note that it says CEST on the first line and then CET on the second one. So the time change for Europe happens that weekend. It happens in the US the following weekend. We think, we're not sure, the math is hard, but we think that time for CET might be wrong. What we confirmed is that on 10/27, the broadcast will start at 10 a.m. local time. That's 10 a.m. Pacific time. So we know 1 p.m. Eastern is correct because the time change won't have happened, but we think that 7 p.m. might be right. So what we're saying is double check when you get to that weekend. Daylight savings time is weird, man. Anyway, so we're going to be broadcasting on twitch.tv/magic. It's going to be Duskmourn House of Horror Draft as well as Standard Construction. We're going to spend a lot of time in this show talking about those two formats. But Maria, how excited are you to see these two formats in action?
I'm so excited, Blake. I think Duskmourn Draft is the best draft of the year. I'm not alone in that opinion, I don't believe. And I'm really, really excited to see what the pros do with it at the World Championship, because basically you can do whatever you want. I mean, maybe I'll be wrong, but that's what it seems like. And so I'm really excited to see what kind of rises to the top as far as the decks are concerned once we hit draft. And of course, Standard, we haven't seen Standard at this level since about last April with Thunder Junction. It's a huge Standard. We had a rotation. So I'm really, really stoked to see what's awesome in Standard. There are so many decks out there as well that I think the landscape is really open and viable in Standard, and I want to see what takes the whole thing down.
Yeah, Simon, I mean, you don't get a choice of what to play. You kind of play what's in front of you. But how are you feeling about this mix of formats? Are you enjoying testing so far?
Yeah, it's super cool. Like, just, of course, as Maria says, this draft format is like very like deep and intriguing. There's a lot of stuff going on. You can easily get lost in the big house of Duskmourn. And then also for the Standard thing, where since there has been a rotation and then no really big Standard event, everyone is kind of like, lost at sea here, trying to figure out what's really going on in the format. And so exploring this is, it's just a super fun challenge, and I've been enjoying it so far.
Good. Do you tend to enjoy going to a big event where the format is pretty well defined, or where it's a little more open like this?
I think both have like their strengths and weaknesses. I definitely like that when things are open, it feels like you can like explore more like wild ideas and weird things. And when it's like more known format, you either like, very specifically when you brew a deck what you're targeting, or you just like get to like super nerd out about a matchup where like it gets in such detail that you usually can't do for an event like this, where there's just so many unknown things already.
Yeah. Now, Maria, I know you're hard at work right now building storylines, looking at what to expect out of this event. And obviously, it's the World Championship. We're going to crown a world champion. Everyone knows that. But this is also the end of the Player of the Year race. Maria, talk a little bit about what's at stake there.
The Player of the Year race is one that the players look forward to every year. It's kind of like, I believe, even in some ways more prestigious than winning the World Championship, because it means your season overall has been absolutely incredible, which, if anybody's played Magic, I mean, you know how difficult it is to do well consistently at tournament after tournament after tournament. So it awards the best performance across the year. Like I said, an incredibly difficult accomplishment. And we have somebody who might be poised to do it back to back, which is absolutely incredible. Simon Koff. So I'm so excited to award that because it's a huge deal. The players, it means so very much to the players in the tournament. It's something that you can carry with you, of course, for the rest of your life. A tremendous accomplishment. And we have the Kai Buddha Player of the Year trophy, which was recently renamed. So that's a huge deal to be giving away this year as well.
Yeah. You mentioned it, but let's throw up the Player of the Year standings so we can talk a little bit about that. Maria, we'll get to you in a sec, Simon. What do you see when you look at this lineup for the standings?
This is just phenomenal. The list of these names, I mean, are you kidding me? Here on the Player of the Year standings, any one of these players taking home the trophy this year would be absolutely incredible. And such huge names in the game as well here at the top of the standings. Everyone has had a stellar year so far. Like I mentioned several times, it's like so hard. I cannot drive that point home strong enough though, because consistent performance at these high-level events is astounding. And these players are all so very good. Jason Yee, one of the best limited players of all time, constantly on the in the top 8 pod on day 2 of these Pro Tour events. Seth Manfield has been a killer for years. Simon Nielsen, I mean, your last 2 seasons, this season and the season before, are almost unbelievable. Javier Dominguez we have in here, world champion. Sam Pardee. I mean, I could just keep going. Anybody who could take home the trophy this year is so incredibly well deserving, and to have such huge names here sitting at the top 8 in the standings is just setting the stage, Blake, for an absolutely unbelievable showdown at World Championship 30. So not only, like you mentioned, do we have the World Championship, we're going to crown a champion, they're going to get $100,000, no big deal, but they also might win Player of the Year, which is very, very cool.
Yeah, and that list, by the way, that top 8 wasn't just let's pick the top 8. That was everyone who is mathematically in the running to take home Player of the Year. And the reason the math stops there is, Simon, because of your season. So how are you feeling about Player of the Year heading into this with the lead that you have and the season you've had?
Yeah, like I would be lying if I said that I didn't feel the pressure, but it's kind of this like weird thing where a lot of it is also like almost out of my hands unless I top 8 again. Because the Player of the Year standings like really value the top 8 performances. You can't actually change that much in the Swiss rounds. I can make it slightly harder for Sam Pardee, that he has to like make the semis instead of the quarterfinals, stuff like that. Is what I can do during the tournament, but mostly I'll just have to like try my best. Of course, I want to make top 8 again. Like I might. No kidding, right? But it's.
If anybody can do it, it's you, Simon.
But I'm. It's like mostly just like It's kind of a weird thing where like if I want to like root for myself to win the Player of the Year championship, or the Player of the Year trophy, I have to root against a bunch of like really incredible and deserving players to not have a good performance or not have a great performance at the World Championship. And so, that always feels like a bit weird. So I'm mostly just like, I'm doing my thing, watching from the sidelines. I estimated my percentages to like get there to be like around 60%, which means that's kind of like a large room for it being grabbed by one of these other people.
Yeah, I love that you did the math on that.
Yeah.
Speaking of math, so let's take a look at how the points are awarded based on finishes. So here you can see the top 8, that 27 points. That is the sort of threshold. That's why in order to catch Simon, who's at 57, he gets 1 point for showing up. Everyone who shows up gets a point. So he'll at least minimum 58. So we were looking at everyone with 31 points and above, which is how we came to that top 8 list. But, I mean, getting that Player of the Year, that first place is going to be challenging. You do get points based on how you finish in the Swiss as well, but obviously the lion's share of points come down to that top 8. And Maria, in your experience looking at these, does the Player of the Year tend to come down to the top 8?
Oh yeah, for sure. It has historically, I believe, as well. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe if Simon locks up a spot in the semifinals, then you are guaranteed to win Player of the Year no matter what. So that's that's something you can be shooting for, I think.
Yeah, exactly. I think if I make top 8 and Seth makes top 8, then yeah, I have to win my quarters or hope he doesn't win the tournament. Like it's something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's there's definitely some scenarios where I could make top 8 and actually still, have work to do.
Unreal. Unreal.
It's potentially a lot of drama on Sunday, which I know Maria's looking forward to.
There's
go ahead. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, I just wanted to mention there's also, when I did the math, I also found 5 different scenarios where there'll be a tie between me and someone else. Which would also be super cool to have the playoff thing.
I have no idea what the tiebreakers are.
Usually you just play a huge match for it on the 2 other times.
The Brad Nielsen special.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the Brad Nielsen, Guillaume Mathion thing.
Okay, but to get to Sunday, you're gonna have to play some draft. You're gonna have to play some standard. So let's talk about those. Let's kick things off by talking about draft. Now, a note as we're going through draft and standard, we're super happy Simon was able to join us today, but he is also deep in testing right now. So he's not going to be giving away any secrets. He's not going to be sharing details and things that his team is very much aware of. First of all, tell us about your team you're testing with before we dive into that.
Yeah, so I'm testing with Team Handshake, like I have been for the past few years. We're a group of names that are getting increasingly more known. It's of course, Javier was already a big player, like Anthony Lee, Carl Sarap. They're here with me right now in South Dakota, where we just met up for a little rendezvous before the big tournament. As well as a host of other players from Europe and the Americas. So it's these guys, we really try and take Magic preparation like a job. We try and do a lot of meetings and structure our testing process. And so it's super cool to work with them, and I think that's really what has benefited me for these past seasons. It's just it's all me being part of this group. I can't thank them enough.
Anyway, so he's not going to be sharing any deep dark secrets. We'll talk surface level. We'll talk about initial impressions. But anything learned. South Dakota? Why are you in South Dakota?
Well, we are visiting our sponsor, Nerdy Nuts.
Okay.
Just for a couple days.
Always be closing, Simon. Always be closing.
I couldn't let that pass. Maria and I are both from Minnesota. We know South Dakota. It's not near Las Vegas. So it's just, I was very curious about that. But okay, all right, good to know. All right, let's talk about DSK draft. So let's throw up some draft archetypes. And Simon, why don't you talk about sort of how you're viewing the format overall and what you're expecting?
So this format is really cool because it's quite balanced. There's a lot of different viable strategies. And it's not it's hard to describe this as an aggressive format or as a grindy format because you can kind of do what you want depending on what your seed allows. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of things about drafting where you just have to figure out what's going on with your seed and such. It's that's really cool about this format.
Simon,
so
I have a question.
Yeah.
This is just for me personally to help me win in draft. So there's more rares in the packs now because of play boosters and stuff. Does that throw off when you're trying to read a signal coming, in your first pack like that? Or do you take longer to solidify your seat? Or is it kind of the same as most drafts for you?
Yeah, I'm not sure that the extra rares definitely throw a wrench in things. You can be past a great bomb rare is oh, how did they not take this? But it's they probably took another great bomb rare. And the fact that the packs aren't as balanced, so it might seem like a color is closed, but it's just because you just had a pack with 10 black or green cards. And so it's a bit weirder that way. But you kind of just have to relearn how you read signals. And just go more by vibes or by using a broader amount of information you can get there. But it's also there's certainly something cool about having more of these because of course the uncommons and the rares are a lot of the exciting cards about drafting, and so it also opens up for you just more often you can have weirder decks that are built around rares than you could in the pre-play booster area. So yeah, so that's like it's different for sure.
All right. So what? Obviously, you're not going to give us secrets. You're not going to tell us like this archetype's better than this. But what are your sort of overall general impressions of the format and the different archetypes?
Yeah, so I mentioned like the aggressive stuff. That's like, the two of the most popular decks that people are drafting on Arena right now is like red-white toy aggro, and blue-white eerie, like tempo aggro sort of thing. So like, the red-white deck is like, and the cool thing about these is that these are not just like regular curve-out aggro decks. They're actually like based around synergy. So you have the red-white things with all these toys that all have 2 power because they're just tiny toys. How scary could they be? And then they have a bunch of things that care about having 2 or less power. And this just like works so well synergistically. If you can just curve out with the right type of creatures, you can really make your stuff like more than the sum of its parts. So that's a very scary aggro deck. And then you have the blue-white decks, which are based around enchantments. And you can kind of make these like really synergistic packages where you just have essentially only cards that care about enchantments and enchantments, because there's enchantment creatures, there's rooms, there's enchantment removal spells, and so you can have decks that like just trigger this stuff like all the time. That can also be super scary to play against, which I guess is fitting for a horror theme to have these scary decks.
Now, Maria, I know you're not playing in the event, but I know you do a lot of testing so that you are familiar with the cards and know what you're talking about. What are your impressions of Duskmourn Draft? What archetypes do you like?
Well, like I said, it's my favorite draft format of the year. I think it's very cool because the colors themselves are just so balanced, right? The win rates of the colors are like almost even at like 55%, with the exception of black, which is a little lower. But like that makes for a spectacular format. So when you're sitting down, you're not like, oh, I can't play this color. You can make almost anything work. My favorite card is Spineseeker Centipede, personally, because I just really like the fixing that it allows, and you can play some really cool 3-color decks. Like, I love playing a teamer deck. I just think it's really fun. Sultai, whatever. It's just a blast to be able to have that flexibility in this format. Obviously, if I get the blue-white Eerie Tempo deck, that's what I'm playing. Fear of Surveillance on turn 2, like, excuse me, like that card just like wins games. And it's just a 2/2 for 2. So I will always pick up as many copies of that as I can get. If you can get Arabella, you should probably be playing Arabella, and you should probably be doming people for like 13 with just a 2-drop or whatever. Like, that stuff is really sweet. But like I said, what's interesting to me is going a little bit deeper and building some really creative strategies with the help of Spineseeker Centipede. So that's my favorite thing to do.
Yeah. Simon, without talking about what's good or not, do you have any archetypes or strategies that you have a lot of fun with?
Yeah, well, I'm the type of person who like I just like generally have fun when I just like play. I mean, I like sort of the like, some of the like Black Sacrifice stuff is like pretty fun to play. And I really like it. It's actually the blue-red rooms, I think, is a good like indication of that, where like it's like hard to like make it come together, but like sometimes you just like have all these like big flyers because you have so many rooms, like stuff like that. It's like like there's a bunch of these things where it's just like weird things that come together, and like some rares that I'm not gonna mention right now, but that just like play out super cool and like better than you'd expect. Stuff like this is really cool. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to. I think I'm suspecting I might have to like the feature draft at the World Championship. And so I'm really just like
there might be a chance, Simon.
Good guess.
Make something cool happen.
Do something cool, perform for the cameras. I'm a big fan of the blue-red rooms deck too. I did live the dream of winning with the room that says you win if you have 8 rooms open. I did that exactly. Well, I mean, I did it a couple times in one draft, but it was like a 13-room deck. It was great.
Blake, can I tell you a room story real quick?
Please tell me a room story.
Okay, so I'm telling this, I shouldn't because I'm just going to embarrass myself, but the pull is too strong. So in the early access streamer event, I was like, oh, I'm going to draft rooms, right? Because that is the cool hallmark feature, new mechanic of this set. It seems super sweet. Rooms are like so much card for your card, essentially. And I tried to draft it. I forced it. It was not open, and my deck was like really bad. But I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm still gonna try and play it. My bad rooms deck, and I want you to guess who I immediately queue into in this early access streamer event.
I don't know.
It was LSV, and it was LSV. It was not you, Simon.
I was like, is it Simon? That's
No, it was Luis. And here's the thing, though. Luis had the best room deck that I think maybe has ever been drafted on Arena, and it was day -1, right? And later on, he went on Twitter and tweeted out a copy of that deck, and he's like, "Sorry, I didn't drop a game. This deck is insane." And like, I'm telling you, I was so embarrassed because I also had the room deck, and my deck was such a bad version of the rooms deck, and I'm playing Luis, who's just crushing me with the ultimate version of the rooms deck. Anyway, I wanted to hide under my blanket for like 3 days after that happened, but now I'm telling you all, and I do have regrets about it. Thank you.
All right, let's move on to standard, and again, Simon's not going to give any secrets of his standard testing so far. We're also like a week out from deck submission. You guys have you'll change decks 20 times between now and then. But he's like, yep, we will.
I have no idea.
See, what I'm playing he's not even going to lie to you. He just doesn't know yet. But we're going to talk about standard as a whole. We're going to do it through the lens of some sort of signpost cards that are markers of what the archetypes are. And we're going to start with one of the early contenders for most powerful cards in Standard, potentially, with Caretaker's Talent. And it's a little buddy here, Basa. So, Simon, what's going on with these cards?
Yeah, so it's very interesting when Caretaker's Talent first appeared. You would think, oh, that's a cute token strategy. You make a bunch of aggressive creatures, you pump them up, and you draw some cards while you do it. And then it turns out that no, this is a control card, and it's an excellent draw engine for control deck because you play stuff like Sunfall, well, that's a sweeper that draws a card. Basa is this incredible stabilization tool, like a 4/5 that gains 4 life and makes a couple fish. That also draws a card if you have Caretaker's Talent in play, or with its own ability sometimes. And then once people realize that you can play stuff like Carrot Cake, which is this cutesy common from Bloomburrow, but that essentially is a divination together with Caretaker Talent.
I was so confused when I first saw that card in a list. I was like, what is happening? Yeah.
But yeah, that means that you don't have to rely on blue for card advantage in your control deck, and that's a huge upgrade. So you can just play mono white if you want to, and that of course gives a lot of consistency, and enables stuff like Layline Arms as a removal spell. And so this deck is really interesting. It grinds just so incredibly well. You have your fountain ports making fish every turn. You just you can outcard almost anyone, and it's kind of an super interesting long game deck.
Yeah, long is, I think, the key word, because I don't know about you, Simon, but my Caretaker's Talent matches always go to time or pretty close.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I would expect.
So, Maria, prep yourself for that.
Well, I was playing some Standard recently, and I saw somebody play Caretaker's Talent with Carrot Cake, and I was like, haha, cute. And then I was like, wait a second, this is busted straight in half. I thought it was a joke. I was like, oh, wow, look at this little meme deck.
It is adorable. It's adorable.
It's super cute.
Yeah.
I love Bloomburrow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great set.
Oh, all right. Standard Powerhouse Carrot Cake. All right, let's move on to a card that's been with us for a long time, but has definitely taken on a pretty central place in the metagame right now, which is Deep Cavern Bat. Simon, we're using this to sort of represent a wide swath of decks. Where do we usually see this card?
Yeah, so this one is the kind of the linchpin for the black mid-range decks. And there's a ton of different ways you can go with with that core. So it's like, the classic mid-range stuff. Like you have some hand disruption. In this case, it's in form of the bat. You have some removal spells. You have some like good creatures. And then the question is just, what do you support that with? Like, do you go for the blue-black style with counter spells and gigs and maybe the new enduring whatever? Or do you go with like black-green where you have even more grind potential with like Mosswood Dread Knight? And Glissa and all these like favorites from essentially the black green deck that like made top 4 of Worlds last year. It's still around. Or you could even like go in this new direction, like incorporating some of these nice like white grindy cards with Zoraline, etc. Really a lot of like directions to go for these black mid-range decks.
All right. Now there, like you said, there are a bunch of flavors. One of the ones I made this list, so I get to put what I want on it, and that's what I did.
Mm-hmm.
An archetype that's I started out playing a lot and is one of these black X mid-range decks is the black-white deck that keys heavily on bats. As it turns out, Deep Cavern Bat, it being a bat, was not so random when it came out a year ago.
No, it was no doubt.
Yeah. So tell us about this deck and especially these 2 cards, Simon.
Yeah, so like this is just like another like kind of like flavor of this of these like mid-range decks. Like as I said, we've seen blue black before, we've seen green black before. We haven't seen that many white black decks. But this one here uses some of these like cool like creatures with like two or three mana costs with ETB effects, and then you have like the Soralines. Maybe you play some Season of the Burrow at the top to bring them back. It's like kind of another way to like grind. You can even like if you want to just go fully bats and like have all these like life gain synergies. Because there's just like so many stuff like planted in standard already. It's really beautiful to see as you explore the format. It's like, oh right, this one has that creature type. I bet they knew about Bloomburrow. Like it's all just like planted things. And it's very nice to discover.
Absolutely. And Maria, I know you said you played a little bit of bats. How do you feel about this deck?
I love this deck, Blake. Me and you both really like this deck. I love a typal deck. And I mean, it's lightly typal, right? But I just love Zoraline. That card is amazing. So I hope some of my friends bring bats here to this World Championship. I don't know if they're going to, but I hope at least one person does so I can cheer for them.
I mean, Zoraline bringing back Liliana of the Veil. I mean, if anything can pull Reed Duke away from Black Green, it might be all the Lilianas of the Veil. We'll see. All right, now let's pivot a little bit to an archetype. It was sort of fringe. It was around. It never made any splashes, but it seems to be getting a bigger following with some pickups. So it's this. Usually mono blue, sometimes it's other colors, blue white, but the Hottie Dein Aberrant Oculus deck. Simon, tell us about this.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like Hottie Dein has kind of like been on the fringes of the format ever since it was printed. It requires like these different things to be played with. There was this blue-white version that played Monastery Mentor together with Hottie Dein, and then of course these work well together. You just play a bunch of cantrips like Sleight of Hand, etc. to enable both these cards, and then you can use Helping Hand, which is a 1 white mana to reanimate a creature that costs 3 or less. So that of course works super well with these creatures that you need to stick around, but you can't play too many. You can't play too many creatures in your deck because then your cards stop working. And the new set here came up with another thing that you can add to that, like blue-white shell with the Abhorrent Oculus, which also like cares about like filling your cards in graveyard. It's really good to reanimate with Helping Hand, and so like this sort of thing is kind of interesting. It's like been played on Magic Online here, and it's like kind of nice to just have these decks just plays a bunch of cantrips and you just rip through your deck and like see what happens.
Yeah, it feels, I mean, it's not exactly the same, but it has sort of that similar feeling to Phoenix and Pioneer, in that you're just trying to play all these cantrips and play some cheap creatures and win pretty fast. But really interesting deck. I'll be curious to see if that one shows up. The next one, the next sort of macro archetype, we're almost certain it'll show up in some form or fashion. And Simon, you're very familiar with this next card, which is Knight Errant of Eos.
Yes.
Give us first. Tell us about your story with this card.
Yeah, I mean, I love this one. It's last year at the World Championship, I played a blue-white soldiers deck, which was really like built around the Knight Errant to just like you have all these like creatures, cheap like creatures, soldier tokens, etc. And so you just built this like board state where you play the Knight Errant, you pick it up with Zephyr Sentinel to like gain even more value, and you just build board state really easily. And then we've also seen this like show up in like Pioneer, for instance, with the Gleeful Demolition type deck, which has also kind of had this like standard equivalent with like red, white, or Jeskai tokens. So there's a few ways to go with this card. Like it's kind of like a linchpin for these like get on board fast white decks, and like white Convoke token decks. And so it's interesting to see how that will go. There's like because there's all these like toy red-white synergies in the new set, like there's a lot of tools for this deck now, and so there's like a lot of things to like play with and surround the Knight Errant with.
All right. Next up, we have an archetype that is really new from Duskmourn. We have this sort of enchantment aggro with our favorite returning card, Ethereal Armor. Tell us about this deck.
Sorry, you said enchantment aggro, Blake. I believe you mean boggles.
I don't. I do not.
It's not boggles if it doesn't have
nobody has hexproof.
Okay, fine. You know what? I just got to take what I can get. You know,
I will defer to the boggles expert on the stream, which is you.
Oh, thank you.
But I think you're gonna have to prove that one a little bit here.
Yeah, no, but this deck is so sweet. I mean, like, check it out. If you can play Ethereal Armor, you're gonna play Ethereal Armor, right?
Right.
No, I really love this deck, Blake. Sorry, no, it's just so much fun, right? And you get these super cool cards, like you get the discount with Inquisitive Glimmer and Enduring Innocence. I love Enduring Innocence. I love it in Draft, and I love it in Standard. And Ethereal Armor can get out of control pretty quickly.
Yeah, Simon, what are your thoughts on this deck?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm also like an Ethereal Armor lover. I've definitely like, played all the glitters and these sorts of things before. And so this is also like right in my wheelhouse of just like, cute white deck that does something all in, but then somehow works. But yeah, so it's really nice that you have like all these like enchantment tools. It almost looks like a draft deck, honestly, just like a crazy good one. But so yeah, that's one of the other new ones that's kind of interesting and nice to play with online and explore.
Yeah, those three cards all in DSK. Someone could draft that and have that on the board at the World Championship.
Yeah, absolutely. I've done that. Yeah, it's nice.
All right, let's switch gears a little bit and get aggressive. So we've definitely seen a lot of this list or versions of this list online, which is red aggro and backed by Layline of Residence. Now, we've already said we're looking at this heavily in best of one on Layline of Resonance, but in best of three, this is kind of I don't want to say it's just another deck because it's very powerful, but what are you seeing out of this list so far, Simon?
Yeah, this is like we've already seen these like mouse prowess aggro decks like show up in the format beforehand. Again, Bloomberg just being incredibly cute set and doing these things. So like you combine these things with like monstrous rages, and of course that's another deck that's in my wheelhouse, like playing heroic at in Pioneer, the Chicago Pro Tour earlier this year, right? So so that's all well and nice, but then Layline of Resonance came out here in Duskmourn, and it's like kind of an interesting ley line in that it's like it's not like doing anything to protect you, it's just doing something aggressive. And the question, like what this does to the deck is that it kind of makes it like completely pop off, where like all of these pump spells and targeted spells just go super bananas. There's like some scenarios where you kill on turn 2. I've yet to witness the turn 2 kill. It's probably a bit overstated, but at least like turn 3 is like very much in the works. And so this deck kind of puts a pressure on the format in a different way. And it's kind of interesting when you like have this in the same format as the mono white deck that just grinds super well. And it's like, like how you're supposed to deal with both. I'm not sure. But this is what the Leyline deck puts on the format.
All right.
When I was playing some standard the other day, I was playing against this iterations of this deck again and again and again,
Mhm.
and it just really surprised me how resilient it is actually, right? Because we think sometimes of aggressive decks as running out of gas, and that's kind of one of the drawbacks of playing them. But with a card like Turn Inside Out, which I saw some of them playing, like whatever, like you just manifest, and guess what? It's a mouse, and you do it again.
Yeah. Well, and
Yes.
even exactly. And I think it was Ember Heart Challenger even has the ability to get you extra cards when it's targeted, and so there's a lot of gameplay there. And whether we see Layline or some aggressive, I think we will see some aggressive mouse deck in some form or fashion. Let's continue with some Bloomburrow creature types here, because we've also seen our lizard friends do some things. Let's throw them up on the screen. We got Laughing Jasper Flint and friends here. Simon, tell us about what's going on with the lizards.
This is absolutely like the kind of the mark of the play design team here. You see Laughing Jasper Flint coming out like, almost half a year before Bloomburrow, but is a lizard. And then you see all the lizards in Bloomburrow having the outlaw creature types, like they're all mercenaries or assassins and such. So it's really nice, like that they were built to like be able to work together. And this is an aggro deck that kind of like works differently. It usually has better mana than other 2-color aggro decks because it has Cavern of Souls, and it tries to like set up ways where it can like ping the opponent every turn for at least 1 damage to like buff up all their other stuff, and then kind of like power through on that. So like it's kind of like a snowball deck in that scenario, in that sense. And if you think like you're stable at like 10 life against lizards, then like you might just die, like not immediately, but like just the constant like paper cuts just being thrown at you, or I guess in this case it's like some claws that are scratching at you until you finally succumb to it. It's a really cool deck.
Yeah. And why would someone? So, if you're looking at this deck and the mouse deck, what are the sort of different play patterns that would cause someone to choose one over the other?
Yeah, so the mouse deck kind of has this like prowessy feel where it plays a few creatures and then a bunch of like spells to support that, which makes it in some ways more fragile, but it also has the ability to grind, like Maria said. But it ends up being weaker against removal spells for that reason. Whereas the lizard deck is like much better against removal spells, but it's weaker against blockers because you don't have your tricks to push through, and you have to rely on like adding a few removal spells and such. But you can't have too many spells because you have all these lizards that are trying to like work together. So it's like it works. It kind of like the tools you have to fight the different decks are different, and so that is what makes standard really cool. Is that you then have to figure out, well, I mean, which, if you're going to react to something, which side are you actually going to react to? You're going to have to make some metagame predictions as well.
Yeah. Well, let's throw another wrench in that, because our next deck is another pole of the format, which is we've been calling this domain ramp for a while, but it's actually a very different looking deck than it was before rotation. So let's throw up some of this stuff. 2 of those look familiar. 1 of those does not. But Simon, tell us about how this archetype has changed.
Yeah, so the biggest thing that has happened to the domain ramp deck that we saw Ikawa win the last standard Pro Tour with is that the tri-lands have rotated out. So you no longer have a land that just has 3 types, which makes it a lot more difficult to get domain. You have the surveil lands, which have types, but it's like it's a lot more challenging to like get the full 5, unless you have Overlord of the Hauntwoods, which if you just impend it for 3 mana, is not only a ramp spell like the deck was already playing before, like Territorial Stomper, which also rotated, but it also just creates this land token that is every land type, which will then work with stuff like your Leyline bindings, and so it's kind of like using these tools, like moving a bit away from just being a straight ramp deck and more towards being essentially a green-white control deck. Again, where because you have card draw, in this case from Up the Beanstalk and Atraxa, you don't need to like be blue to have this control deck work. And so it's kind of a different like style to build these like more controlling defensive decks. But this one does have like some ramp aspects. and is like kind of like middle ground. Like, you gotta play some 7-drops like Herd Migration or a track set that you're trying to get to eventually. So it definitely has that like ram feel to it.
All right. Now there is Simon, a sort of special flavor to this deck, which is our next card. Not every list is going to play this, but this was a wild one for me to see return, which is Zur Eternal
Yes.
Schemer. What is going
Yes.
on here?
Yeah, this is a funny one, and the combo here is Sir plus Overlord, because you can activate the ability and you can kind of awaken an Overlord. So it's meant to like turn an enchantment like a Leyline Binding into a creature. That's a strong synergy in itself. You make a 6/6 with like lifelink and hexproof and death touch. But if you do it on an Overlord, well, the Overlord's like, even if they have an impending counter on it that's still ticking down, if you use Sir to make that into a creature, well, they're just gonna wake up and be like, they're not going to have their normal power and toughness. They're going to have power toughness equal to their mana cost, but they're going to have their attack triggers, which, even though they still have their impending counters on. And so that's like kind of a nice extra synergy. It's also, the Overlords also like work well with the Beanstalk. Like when you use Overlord of the Hauntwoods after a turn 2 Beanstalk, you still draw a card even though you only paid 3 mana for the impending cost. And so there's like all these like nice synergies and like weird cards that pop up that work with these exciting Overlords.
Yeah. Maria, what are your hopes and dreams for Zur?
Well, it's just so funny because I had a commander deck with Zur because that's my jam. We're playing auras, we're playing enchantments and stuff. And to see it like used in a completely different use case in standard is just very cool. So I hope we see it this weekend. And I mean, up the beanstalk, I mean, get real. If you can play a card that's banned in modern and standard, maybe you should.
Probably. You should think about it. That's kind of our overview of standard. Simon, any last thoughts on the format as a whole?
No. Can you please give me a thought so I can know what to play? That's all
Maria just told you play up the beanstalk. It's banned in other formats.
That makes sense. It's just it's to draw a bunch of cards.
Play
right,
banned
easy.
cards.
I'm locking it in. I'm gonna go submit right now.
Great. Thank you, Maria. What are you looking forward to in standard?
I mean, it's just so cool. I mentioned this at the top of the show, to have such a huge format. We haven't seen it since April with Thunder Junction here at this level. Like Simon mentioned, it's anything goes. We don't know what the best deck in the format is because we haven't had a Pro Tour level tournament in such a long time. We just had a rotation. I am so incredibly excited to see what cream rises to the top here at World Championship 30 because we've got the best minds, in Magic, all in their separate testing teams trying to figure out this puzzle. And when we come together, some people are going to have it really wrong and some people are going to have it right. And that's just the most exciting environment that I can possibly imagine for a huge tournament to cap off the season.
Absolutely. All right, let's throw the graphic back up that shows the times, if you would, producer Sean, to remind people of when to tune in. Maybe, we're not sure. Time is a weird thing. As we said at the top, we think that 7 p.m. CET time might not be correct, simply because Europe is going through its transition on daylight savings time, which isn't called
it
daylight.
Probably should be 8 p.m. I think, because we
put the
clocks back.
But sure. double check. The 1 p.m. Eastern time, 10 a.m. Pacific time on the 27th is correct. All the times on the 25th and 26th are correct. It's definitely going to be on twitch.tv/magic. That's correct. Maria Bartholdi's going to be there. That's correct.
Oh, yeah.
You will definitely see Simon Nielsen playing. That's correct. So make sure that you're tuning in the weekend, not this weekend, but the following weekend for the Magic World Championship. Lot going on, lot to see. A couple reminders about MagicCon that weekend. So that's going to be all streaming live Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Additionally, we're going to have a few other cool things happening. The Foundation of Magic's Next Era, that's the panel I'm hosting. That's going to be happening on Friday afternoon at 1 p.m. local time. And then we will, of course, put that video up on the channels, YouTube and whatnot. After that is done, we also have the Foundations debut panel. So to learn more about this upcoming set, Foundations, you'll want to tune into that. Additionally, we're just going to have a bunch of cool stuff all weekend. Foundations previews kick off with that Friday. So if you're interested in learning more about, say, Jumpstart 2025, we're going to have some surprise and delight and fun stuff that weekend. You'll get to learn about that. And MagicCon, of course, the normal trappings of all the cool stuff that happens at a MagicCon. Definitely, if you're going to be there, it's going to be a great time. And if you're not, tune into all the videos and the live streaming that we'll have. Next week, there will be no Weekly MTG. We are traveling, so we will be on airplanes or in various other places. I'm sure Simon will maybe be in South Dakota. I don't know where, like...
I'll be in Vegas by then.
You'll be in Vegas by then. Great. South Dakota is a great place to focus because not much else to do. Just randomly throwing shit.
Roasting South Dakota.
It has Mount Rushmore and yeah.
The Black Hills?
The Black Hills? It's a lovely state. Okay. I'm not gonna know why I'm randomly taking on South Dakota here.
Especially coming from Minnesota.
I know, I'm from Minnesota. Minnesota's great. We have lakes.
Minnesota's the best, not biased.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in, and we will see you in a couple weeks.